Welcome to Team Revenue Week 4. We're going to be talking about metrics specifically today, which is one of my favorite topics. But just as a review, kind of who we are and what we're talking about every Wednesday, we think Team Revenue is a multidisciplinary, unified team comprised of sales, marketing, and other key stakeholders throughout an organization who work in alignment to drive long-term, recurring, stable revenue. And so we kind of break that down into 5 points. The first being that we're going to look to align incentives across sales, marketing, and other components of the overall team to reward everyone for being aligned and winning in the same sense. The second thing is we talk about measuring and optimizing only for those metrics that actually lead to business outcomes, which are strategic wins for the business. And this is where we're going to focus our time today. And I think it is one of the most undervalued, under-discussed, and under-thought through components of business, understanding which metrics you should be optimizing for and measuring and why. And then the third point is building a demand engine. We talked about this last week, which is built on community and content. Really, you're trying to build a community of future buyers and customers that surround the brand, providing value to those folks, whether they're current customers or prospects, without strings attached. A lot of times before people are even ready to buy, you're providing value to them and you're allowing them to see you and your brand as credible, to understand who you are and what you do, and that you're there to be a benefit to them, not just to ram them through your sales process. And then point 4, actually building a customer-centric revenue strategy where you're not just looking to justify your existence as a sales org or a marketing component of the company. You're actually looking to benefit the customer with every aspect of how you do what you do. And so this is something where you're going to need to spend time listening to customers together. You're going to need to spend time listening to the perspective of other members of your team that deal with the customer post-sale, CS, engineering, whoever it is, to understand the entire customer perspective. Most importantly, get into their head. Understand that the buyer's process is their process. It's not yours to own or control in the way that sales-led ideas used to drive the way buyers' processes were understood in business. And then kind of the big 30,000 foot level point is that we want to cultivate a shared team mission, vision, values, and culture. And we talked about this, the first week, and this is something that it seems kind of obvious, and almost every executive in every company would say, yes, of course we want to do this. Yes, of course we want to be aligned. Of course we want to be on the same page about mission, vision, values, and culture. Almost no executive ever would say, no, that's not important. But what does it look like in real life? If you're not in the C-suite, when you look at the decisions made by those in leadership above you, do you see the consistency in mission, vision, values, and culture in those smaller decisions as well as the big ones? And this is the kind of thing that as you try to align teams and get everybody on the same page to bring value to your customer, either you're going to see that consistency and alignment from the top all the way through the organization, or you're not. And so ultimately, that alignment allows every member of the team to understand that we are on the same team, we do have the same goals, and we are ultimately looking to serve the customer by bringing the same kind of value proposition throughout every part of the organization. So that's what we mean when we talk about team revenue, those 5 points. Obviously, it's a dynamic thing. One of the reasons we have this conversation every week is so that we can grow and understand maybe new nuances of it. And those words may change, we may tweak them. The goal is to create a healthy conversation where everybody can benefit and we can get better together, ultimately. So today our topic is on measuring and optimizing for only those metrics that lead to the business outcomes that are strategic wins for the business. And I mentioned kind of in my lead-in how much I love this topic. And I love this topic because no one else seems to love this topic. And I say that with kind of tongue in cheek. Not no one else, but so few business leaders are really engaged in understanding which metrics matter and why they matter. And one of the reasons I think this is that it's confusing and that there's no exact formula that every business can adopt for exactly all of the metrics that matter for the business. And so when you try to translate, what you've done at a previous company in a different role to what you're doing now, it may not fully translate when it comes to all of the metrics that matter. And I think this is one of the things that separates a really good strategic leader from somebody who just knows how to repeat past success. Because repeating past success is kind of an interesting topic. If you want to get into a side conversation, I've been successful in building materials, in taking a company from no go-to-market strategy and 10xing the revenue in 3 years. That does not mean that everything that I did at that company is going to work, even in another building materials company, because that customer might be a different type of customer. There might be different concerns. There might be different dynamics with the submarkets or the distribution channels or any number of variables. And so, like most questions that are worth asking, on some level, the answer to this question, which metric should we use, is it depends. On some level, almost any question that's worth asking, you're going to find that there's a degree to which the answer is it depends. And so that's where the leaders that really have the ability to think contextually about their business and their customer and their product and their verticals that they're in really separate themselves from folks who just kind of go back to the same well that they got water from last time. And I think when we start talking about metrics here, there's a couple of things that I think about. The first is many businesses go wrong with metrics when either they're just repeating, past metrics that worked, or they're just kind of trying to justify their own existence within the business. So there are entire sales and marketing organizations within businesses who are judged based on metrics that have nothing to do with actually driving long-term sustainable revenue. And I want to separate revenue from long-term sustainable profitable revenue, because all revenue is not created equal, right? So in SaaS, you want to avoid churn. That's the customer that doesn't stick around very long. That's the customer that buys, but then very quickly realizes they're not actually getting a whole lot of value from what they bought. And so they're out pretty quickly as soon as they're contractually able, or maybe even before. And so every vertical, every business, every industry is going to have a parallel to what SaaS calls churn. You're going to have different aspects of the way customers might leave the business. And when you talk about building materials specifically, you have oftentimes a distributed sales model. So your customer as a manufacturer is actually a dealer who deals with the end customer and some of the other players that are in the business transaction. So when we talk about justifying your existence for the wrong reasons, for example, in marketing, we don't really care how many leads you generated if you aren't able to close any of them, or if the ones that you do close result in very short-term, unstable, or dissatisfied customers. That's not good revenue. That's not the right metric to drive good revenue, just general leads. I have a personal story about this, because when I first got started with this company that I had this past role with, I was describing earlier, I was in charge of sales and marketing equally. So I found myself having to deal with all of the bad leads that I generated. So I had this one call, and it was a $5,000 window I was trying to sell. And this guy called, said, "Hey, I just saw your product. It's really awesome. I really love it. I really want it for my house. And can I get a quote?" And I'm like, "Sure." This is like week 2 for me. And I'm like, "Let me just put up, what are the size, what are the specs, whatever." And I'm, put together a quote. And I said, "It's $5,000. He's like, "Did you accidentally put on an extra 0? And I said, "What do you mean?" He was like, "It's 10 times too expensive." And of course, he was wrong. The customer isn't technically always right, but they are always the customer. But when you talk to somebody like that, and they are completely unable to understand the value that you are bringing with your product to solve their problem, and there's a huge disconnect there, that's not the kind of lead you want to generate. You don't want to deal with 100 of those a week. You don't want to leave your sales team dealing with a bunch of people who are completely disconnected from the value that you're bringing. That's the wrong kind of lead to generate. And so when we talk about metrics, we want to talk about the kind of metrics that are going to drive that long-term sustainable revenue. I'll give you an example that is pretty transferable. And that is, you start to see long-term engagement with content that you're presenting to the marketplace from people who pop into your funnel much later. So your sales team doesn't even talk to them until they're very highly educated and they have a high level of intent. And I would say this is one of the ways that you can determine a solid metric, because it's going to be things that indicate that long-term engaging with your company and your brand long before they even present to your sales team. And again, some of this is going to depend on, what you're selling, who you're selling it to. But if you think about it, right, if you're the sales team, and I've been in a quota carrying sales role as well, I would really rather deal with people who already know who my company is, and they already know the value that I provide as, part of that company. And maybe they even see us as credible. They see us as, just helpful to people like them and understanding their business, right? So in order for people to gain that kind of understanding, they have to interact with our brand in ways that are maybe not so outbound looking, right? Maybe they're just genuinely perusing the website and they see a piece of content. I was evaluating a company earlier this week and kind of getting an understanding of what they do. And they have this really, really great video series that basically in 5 minutes shows that their software platform does what they say it does. So they call some random person and basically throw them into a customer service call. Their software teaches people and guides people through a customer service conversation. And so it's obviously for, educated and trained reps to use, but they call random people up who have never been an agent before. And they say, here, sign into the software. We're going to have you pretend to be an agent using our platform and prove how easy it is to use. And I found myself drawn to that video content right on the front of their website. And I watched several of these little 5-minute videos before I realized how many I'd watched. And I was thoroughly engaged with how they were using the software. And I basically got a self demo from this. I got proof of concept for it. And I became a believer in the value proposition that this company provides before I was even done with the first video. And they just present these right on the front of their website. It was a really, really good approach, right? And so if I'm trying to measure the marketing of that company, I'm going to want to know how many people are watching those videos because they're really high quality. Are people watching them to the end? And how many of those videos are resulting in demo requests and people saying, hey, I want to learn more? And my guess is that's a pretty high number, right? So, we want to see metrics set up that show engagement over the long term with the content that you're putting out. We want to see metrics that are focused on and used for optimization that are showing growth both in intent and in self-education, right? Then the third thing I want to talk about is creating an iterative framework that aligns all relevant teams. And this is really something that, comes from a 30,000-foot view of a successful company and what a team that works well together looks like. So you've got people that have different roles within the company, and yet we're all striving for the same goal. So what we need is a culture and a framework for how we do business together, where we listen to one another, we learn from one another's sort of perspective in the interactions that we have with the customer, and we're able to put that into practice by making changes. It's sort of like the analogy that I like to use is, in business, you're always putting together or repairing or tweaking or adding features to the airplane after it takes off. If you're kind of in that static point where you're looking back over even a year's period and you're like, we're doing well, but we haven't really tweaked anything or changed anything. It's almost a guarantee, as fast as society and the internet and culture is changing, that you're leaving money on the table. Because you're either ahead of the curve with how you need to be responding to your customers' needs, or you're behind. There's really no in between, right? And the way that people are buying is changing so fast, and the way that the society is interacting with the internet and with companies is changing so quickly. You constantly have to be learning from one another as we learn from the customer together. And that's almost like a framework you have to build into the culture of your company, that you're always just learning and growing. And the metrics are right at the center of that. So what metrics are going to be put forward as, our KPIs, our key performance indicators in different aspects of the business? What metrics are we going to be measuring and optimizing for as we do something like an OKR, where we're looking to have key results that lead to specific objectives? So all this kind of puts together this idea of metrics. And notice we haven't really talked a lot about a bunch of very specific metrics. And that's because largely we want to create a framework or a philosophy that helps us to determine the right metrics, more than trot out, this metric always works no matter what, because that's kind of where you get yourself into trouble, especially as things are changing so quickly. So these are my thoughts about metrics and how to optimize for the right ones. I want to introduce our featured guest, Sam from Refine Labs. Honestly, man, you're one of my favorite folks on LinkedIn, and just appreciate everything that you bring to the table. And this is your bread and butter. So I really just want to kind of turn the mic over to you and let you share with us kind of your thoughts on how to choose the right metrics.
Yeah, happy to. Please interject, ask questions, all that. I'm happy to tell you how I approach things, but I like to get more into like practical examples and hear what you all think. So one of the first things to me that I find is something that when we start with a new client that's helpful is you hear metrics, goals, KPIs, optimization for this, all used interchangeably, but those are very different things. So when you think about it, a goal is, what is our goal as a company? Should be revenue. We should keep the company alive. So a goal should be something like, this year we need to generate $12 million in revenue, which means we're going to need $36,000 in pipeline if we win at 33%. Indicators, KPIs, are things that lead to success in those goals. So when we talk about KPIs, those are things that should be used as guideposts, but they should not be something that someone is strictly held to. So that's where like the lead example, I think, has become a little bit sticky in the marketing circle, where you have a goal of, 100 deals need to close this month. And so leadership says, okay, let's reverse engineer this, and we can help marketing figure out what they need to do to support the business goal, which is a completely good thing to do. All business leaders should think about, okay, how does this tie back to this function? Where it starts to go wrong is you start to get away from what that core goal was, and you say, okay, well, marketing isn't actually selling, so they need to supply things that our team can sell. And so they'll say, if we need to sell 100 deals, we need 1,000 leads, because we know that we convert at this rate, that rate. And what happens is that goal becomes a goal for marketing, when really, if you think about it, there's a lot of assumptions that say, well, you could get to those 100 deals through a number of different ways by different levers, from conversion rates to deal size to deal speed to industry. There's so many factors that go into it. And that's where, I mean, as a marketer, even I had done this before at previous organizations, where you're gold on leads. I am paid at the end of the day based on my ability to hit this goal. So, well, I can get really cheap leads if I do content syndication or gate this ebook, and I'm going to hit my goal. Looks good to leadership. I've done everything I can. But then when you follow that through, the company goal, the revenue is not being hit all of a sudden. So it's like, why is this a goal if it's not leading to the overarching goal? And that's where we say, it should be more of that indicator to success. And you can so easily gamify those types of things, where we need to say, okay, what's the North Star that we're working towards together? And then if we start to notice that things aren't aligning anymore, where you said, hey, if I hit 1,000 leads, we'll be good. I hit 1,000 leads, we're not good. We need to reassess this goal KPI in order to figure out what should we really be focusing on, and are these the right metrics for me in this specific role as I support the company.
That's really solid. I kind of want to ask you a follow-up there. One of the things that you said kind of provoked a thought in me. So much of the predictable revenue mentality is just taking past close rate and extrapolating that in both directions to determine what actions should be undertaken by both sales and marketing. What are the flaws that you see with that? Kind of unpack that a little bit for us more so.
Yeah, that gets into we've always done it this way, we'll always continue to do it that way mentality. So that's saying, okay, if we're taking all historical rates, are you going to continue to do all of the same historical things that you used to do, or assume that buyers are going to do the exact same things that they used to? And that's where you can only control so much. So yeah, you can control things from the business side. I'm not going to change our process from lead to sales handoff, or we're not going to implement this new tech stack tool, whatever you want to do. But the thing you can't control is how buyers buy today. And that's where it's become tough. Buyers used to not have the control in being able to access information. You had to go and visit their booth at the trade show. You had to fill out the form in order to learn about that product. But now there's review sites that aggregate all this data, or your competitor saying, well, if someone wants this, why don't I just, give them, like you said, let them watch the video of how my product works on our website. They're going to come, and I don't have to do that terrible discovery explaining and selling who we are. They get the value of it. And so once you get to that point, that's where you start to think, okay, is this the right path moving forward for how our buyers want to buy today, or do we need to start changing things up? And that's going to impact what you need to be doing from top down when you think of, okay, well, if I want to show people more things, do I need to spend more? Do I need to get on different platforms? Do I need to create content in different ways? If we give this to people for free and we used to count those as leads, what's going to happen to those leads? What are we going to do with our SDRs who used to be following up on all of these? And you start to have this trickle down effect that slashes all those old KPIs and goals. And if you aren't addressing those and really thinking through what that means for your business, you're going to be stuck wondering, well, where did we go wrong? What happened when you didn't iterate and move with the times as you should? If you want to, I mean, competition's always changing, people are always changing. If you're not changing, you're dying, to steal the famous quote or whatever. So that's what you have to think about, is how do we continue to improve and adapt to how our buyers want to buy, because they have the power now. You're a commodity, whether you like it or not. There is almost nothing that has a monopoly anymore. There's someone else that they can go to. If they don't have a good experience, they don't get what they want from you.
No kidding. And I think there is some diversity with regard to the specific industry and product and all of this, but at the same time, this is a larger societal change that is ongoing, and it hits different industries quicker than others, right? Typically tech or SaaS is going to be on the leading edge of these kinds of things. But there are other industries that are starting to feel this as well. And, having looked at this from the sales perspective as well as the marketing perspective, there is a culture of, let's go out there, beat down our prey, drag it home and eat it, right? Within sales orgs in a lot of cases. And unfortunately, rather than asking a better 30,000 foot level question about our go-to-market strategy, when sales numbers start to falter, we just kind of increase the level of intensity and maybe increase the headcount in sales. And we're going to go out there and we're going to sell, right? And so one of the things that we talk about on this, meeting every week is the ethical implications of the way that we are measuring success in our business. And specifically, why is it considered a victory when we've kind of coerced someone to buy our product that really isn't a good customer? It's not. It just isn't, right? So, the metrics that we use, both in the marketing and the sales side, and I think we're trying to articulate that we should have metrics that align both together, right? But the metrics that we use will determine or really show what we believe a victory looks like for our company. And if it's something that involves coercion or just being such a good salesperson, hey, we're going to go hire 10 Wolf of Wall Streets and we're going to convince everybody to buy this product even if they don't need it. Nobody actually says that out loud, but on some level, is there a flavor of that in our go-to-market strategy? Are we just depending on closers to close business rather than actually aligning ourselves with the need of real customers and finding a way to, as a company, meet that need? It's a completely different philosophy. And I think as society becomes more resistant to intrusive sort of tactics, whether they be sales or marketing tactics, and nobody wants to get on a sales call to buy a hot dog on the corner of the street, you're going to see this grow even more. So, Mikhail, I'd love for you to unmute yourself and share what you got on your mind, man.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Sam. I just wanted to add another dimension. As maybe, Rob, you're familiar with this dimension from your past experience, but on LinkedIn, usually when all these discussions happens, there is this assumption that we talk about SaaS. So I work for a company that is industrial manufacturer, not SaaS, and most of our business goes through distributors. So we don't see actually end users, people who actually use and buy our stuff, and who is our target audience buying from us. So for us, metrics and attribution is extremely complicated, mostly impossible. And I just wondering if you both have any thoughts in terms of like, what would you do? Like, just to give you some examples, we could, so if we have a contact with a lead, let's say high intent, it could be Tesla, SpaceX, that kind of size, right? And we work with them, on our solution, and at some point they disappear. You don't know why, right? But after 6 months, you find out that they actually implemented it. but they don't need you. They buy it from a distributor. So they just moved on to a different thing that they deal with. So you don't have even that kind of data. And distributors place large orders from you, but you don't know where it goes. So for us, it's what we have revenue, but we cannot actually trace it in a satisfactory manner to any kind of activity that we're doing. So we do a lot of like common sense, gut feeling type of marketing.
Right.
So we're looking at revenue and a few more things. But I wonder if you, especially you, Sam, I don't know if you have that kind of clients at Refine Labs. Just curious.
Yeah, so to make sure I understand, it's like the distributors almost a middleman where you might sell to them, but then who they sell to from there is
they don't share this information with us because they have thousands of vendors, and these are really big companies. They just don't care, and they wouldn't share this information. It's a secret.
Yeah.
And there could be like several layers of distributors, and businesses also buy off Amazon. So this is another kind of unknown.
I think we don't work with anyone like that, but a similar thing that I would say is, it's like you could have two purchase motions. There's some companies where you have a sales-led motion. You have to get a demo. You have to talk to a sales rep, or you have a product-led motion. Hey, here's our free product. Download it now and you can start using it. So the way I equate that is you have distributors who they can buy from, or you have people that could buy directly from you. I would focus on what you can measure and see at the end of the day. I'm probably oversimplifying this, thinking I don't have the full picture of it, but I would look at with your distributors, understand what information you get from them. I might imagine that they make up 80% of your total revenue, and then 20% might come from direct buys, like those smaller organizations. So when I see a number like that with our clients, I say, okay, let's do more of what's generating 80% of our revenue, because often that's taking up less of our time. So based on what you know of the distributors, what can you find out from them that go beyond revenue? Is it what data points are going to help you figure out how can I continue to grow in this? Is it by location where they're at, or these distributors have 10 employees, 100 employees, 1,000 employees, or do they tell you we distribute to 1,000 different companies, 5,000 different companies, and start to break them down into different segments to figure out what's working? For those who do buy directly from you, maybe you could make some assumptions and say, we usually find that it's typically car manufacturers or robotics plants or whatever that is. And then talk to your distributors and say, this is who's often buying from us. Are you seeing similar trends? But if they're not forthcoming and sharing all their specific data, you might have to do a little bit more research, insights, gathering hypotheses, and then go and have some calls with your distributors to find some of that.
That's a good answer. I guess one question I had for you, just to kind of make sure I'm understanding, you're telling us that you really don't get any feedback whatsoever from your distributors currently?
So from end users, so we kind of call them end users and distributors. So end users, these are our real target audience. We have we get a lot of feedback from them, and our sales team work directly with end users. But we do not necessarily see the end of the deal, right? Because they can buy elsewhere. But distributors, they just don't share that kind of information. It's just, these are companies that have these are huge corporations. And they would probably share some of it if you would be a good percentage of their revenue, but it's not the case for the majority of vendors.
It's an interesting relationship, because they could see it as, well, you might go and just sell straight to them, and then they're no longer buying from us as a distributor if they can go straight to the source. So I'm wondering if that's part of the hesitation from them.
It is, but they have a lot of power. So there's a lot of like status quo on the market. They have a lot of power, and they have a lot of exclusive contracts with huge manufacturers, and you just don't want to to lose access to them.
Yeah.
You know, they're preferred supplier to all these companies. It's just a situation you can't really fix and go around it somehow.
So do you have trouble getting time with the decision makers at the distributors to even have a deeper conversation? Is that a struggle?
Yeah, that they wouldn't listen. I mean, it's, you know, you have to be a very well, first of all, when you have a chance to talk to someone like this, they would just tell you right away that they won't share this information. You have to be, you know, providing more revenue for them to actually, when you are providing more revenue for them as a vendor, so then they can share some of it. You know,
I guess
they
I would
can
just
give you
try to
access to
ask,
some of their
I
customers.
guess I would just try to ask questions in any interaction that you do get about what value you are providing to your distributor. Because if you weren't providing value, they wouldn't do business with you, right? So on some level, they're trying to leverage their place in the market to keep control over the whole transaction. And it's probably a game of chicken on some level where, you know, they probably don't have as much leverage as they act like they do, but they have already always controlled the transaction. And because they have the contracts with the larger manufacturers and so forth, that your product is a part of their provision to that larger contract, they're basically using that as a reason not to give you very much control, right? And long term, I would be concerned about your ability to control your, you know, revenue and profitability when you don't have the ability to actually engage with the kind of information that it's going to take to know whether you're doing a good job at providing value, right? And I think that that would be a long-term concern for me with that business model, just because, and I know there are industries that operate this way, you know, they're out there for sure. You know, building materials is that way at times because there are big players in the market that control geographical regions for, you know, such a large percentage of the marketplace, specifically in windows and doors, which is the segment that I was in building materials. You know, in many geographical regions, there's only one distributor that really has their act together that can do, you know, commercial and residential luxury window and doors. So if you want to sell in that region, you pretty much have to make nice with that distributor and how they do business, and their rules kind of go. Because, you know, unless you want to be installing a high warranty liability product yourself 30 hours from home, you're going to need them, and you're going to need them to, you know, play ball with you on some level. So you have to figure out sometimes with business exactly how to split the hair. And sometimes you have to deal with short-term stuff that's not great in order to get where you want to go. But I guess I would be concerned about the long-term, you know, partnership, because it's less of a partnership than what I would be looking for if I had the choice, right? If you can't get data and metrics and feedback from the person who's actually two-stepping your product to the end user to know whether you're even providing the value that you hope to provide, right? So you're kind of flying blind there.
It's just the reality of the market. You know, you're just a fraction of percent out there. It's just, you know, you can't change it. And at the end of the day, so I'm not worried about long term, because this is, you know, the end user uses our tool. You know, they can buy it elsewhere next year or next month. You know, but they choose to buy there, and we have no visibility. And just going back to our conversation, because this is like a big topic. There are a lot of details how this business is done. But going back to our topic of metrics, I just wanted maybe to talk about quality metrics, you know, of marketing and business, you know, from business perspective, like, you know, what are quality metrics we could use, maybe.
From the marketing standpoint or the business standpoint?
like for marketing metrics from a business perspective.
Okay. And what types of marketing activities are you currently doing? Is it a lot of customer acquisition, like trying to bring on new people to buy, or is it a lot of repeat business, existing customers?
Yeah, so everything, I guess. So we're reaching the entire audience, regardless where they are, where they have a need right now. And we do content that is rather for the audience. And so this is like a brand play where we're simply there for them, and they would just know that who we are, what we do, and in the time of need, they would come to us. So this is long-term brand play. That's what we're focused on right now. And I just wanted to hear maybe a general advice in terms of how do you do it normally, if you have any kind of metrics for your clients. Fine.
Yeah. So I mean, the highest level is definitely going to be, you think about marketing for the business, marketing sourced pipeline, marketing sourced revenue. So what can we tell that marketing did bring in for the company as a whole? So not to go down the attribution rabbit hole, there's a couple different ways that you could figure out, well, what does marketing sourced mean? I'd say the two simplest way of doing it are, you could look at what created the initial demand or the spur for them to come to us. That's marketing. Or what was able to effectively capture them finally coming in and saying, I'm ready to make this purchase decision. So if you use a traditional attribution method of last touch reporting, that's going to do a great job of capturing demand. So that's going to be what source, what campaign, what medium, what drove them on that final visit to say, I'm ready to talk to your sales team or to make this purchase. So that's going to look at things like if they came in from your website, okay, did they come from a Google organic search? Did they know who your brand already was and they went directly to your website? Did they click on a social ad? So that's going to be what captured the demand. What we like to do is marry that with on the forums or in the sales conversations, we like to find out, well, how did you first hear about us? What was it? Because oftentimes with these larger purchase decisions, if someone's not buying a toothbrush, they're usually doing research. They're really figuring out who's the best vendor to go with. So there's usually something that's not that last channel that brought them to you. So if they came directly to your website, you had to have done something before that for them to remember who you were. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known your website's address to come to. So usually that's where you'll find an insight like, oh, I found out from, my buddy Joe buys from you all and recommended that I check you out. Or I heard you on a podcast. I saw a LinkedIn post, or my mother-in-law uses you all. I mean, it could be anything, but that's going to help you figure out where that was generated from. So are we doing things on social that are panning out long-term, even though that's not driving the initial attribution right off the bat? So the long story short of it is, marry both those to get insights to say, if it was sales truly picked up the phone, called this person who's never spoken with them before and was able to convince them on the call, that's absolutely sales sourced. But if you start going through this kind of process to figure out what is marketing doing and what channels and content and mediums are all working, those two questions, or the ability to capture that information from both those, should help give you some great insights around the pipeline and revenue side of things.
It's a great answer. Another topic I wanted to kind of join on to what you were just saying, you kind of asked the question there at the beginning of what you shared, are you looking more to grow with acquisition, or are you looking more focused on retention? And I think this is an important conversation, because a lot of times there are even questions about the role of customer success or customer experience folks within the go-to-market strategy. And I think one of the things that's often missing is the satisfaction of your current customers and the value that creates for your go-to-market. And specifically thinking about customer success specialists and their interactions with the customers, and the way that they can provide invaluable data that help you to understand if you're actually bringing in the right customers long-term anyway. And so there's a number of sort of intertwined dynamics, I think, that are often ignored or undervalued between CS and the other go-to-market components of the company. And I think that's a topic that needs more conversation and needs more unpacking, just generally speaking. I mean, even if you just were to quickly Google customer success marketing, there's an enormous diversity as to what we're even talking about, right? What is the conversation we're even having at that point? So, you know, Sam, I don't know if you can share a little bit about your thoughts on customer success in relationship to the overall go-to-market strategy. But I think it's a topic that needs some more discussion in general.
Yeah, well, I can tell you firsthand, retained revenue is a heck of a lot easier to make than that new revenue, always trying to acquire new people. So Mikhail, maybe this is another metric that could be valuable for you. It's looking at the acquisition cost payback period and then thinking about how that ties into what you know with how long your customers are staying with you. So say, for example, you have a payback period of 12 months. So it costs you $12,000 to acquire a customer. The contract value is $12,000. It's going to take 12 months to pay that back. If your contract is set up, or you know they're only going to do business with you once, you're not making money, you're not losing money, you're just netting out at zero. So what you often want to do is this is where customer success comes massively into play with how can we make this person a long-time customer, where say you acquire them for $12,000, contracts $12,000. If you know that they're going to stay with you for 5 years, you've got 4 years of revenue right there. If they're going to keep paying $12,000 every year after that, you don't have to acquire them anymore. You just have to focus on that relationship, keep them happy, things like that. So that's where looking at the payback period or the customer retention rate, those are incredibly important, because it's one thing to acquire a customer, but if you are churning them out the back end with, you know, the Wolf of Wall Street sales reps, you don't care about how long they stay or anything like that, but you know, you just want that initial contract in, and you're not looking at, well, what does this mean for the company, and is it gaining or losing money at the end of the day for us when we think about the next 12, 24, 36 months? That's where you'll really want to focus on those. And so customer success, you know, I remember the first time I saw a metric at a company, it was saying our current retention rate is 85%. This year, we want to increase it to 86.5%. And I'm just like, that's such a bad metric. Why do they care about that? That's so small. And then I looked at how much money we made as a company each year and how that 1.5% was hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. I was like, that's a great metric. That makes sense, because that's a small percentage, but that is a huge deal to this company. So that's where marketing and sales can figure out, well, what can we find out about those customers who are staying for a long time? What are those common things that we're noticing with them? Is it users in certain industries or certain locations or job titles, and really start to figure out what is it that they enjoy? Is it product feature? Is it, you know, how they use it? How do we improve upon that and also add to that relationship to keep them staying for a long time to come? And also, this is the model for what we should be going after for new customers, and let's bring in more of those, and that's going to increase your retention rate over time as you have more of that, and the others are slowly cycling out.
That's really good stuff. I actually want to push it another level deeper though, Sam, because I think beyond just retention rate, which is critical, there's the aspect of the brand evangelist, right? So you cross over from not just not losing that customer, and their revenue, but for that customer to become an evangelist in the marketplace for you, because their satisfaction is so high, because they're having so much success as a customer of yours that the guy that they know down the street that works for a competitor, when they go out for lunch, they start talking about your product at lunch. And suddenly you've got a sales lead that really didn't come from sales. It really didn't come from marketing per se. But guess who's going to get credit in a traditional attribution-based business model? And this is where I think you've got to have different kinds of metrics if you really want everybody on the same page. So I know I have become an evangelist for a company that I was the buyer, and then because I was looking for a solution, and I did some Google searching, and then I ended up becoming the buyer, and then I became the customer, and I was so happy with it that I offered to be the guy who gives a testimonial or how can I support you guys? Because you guys are supporting me and my business goals. And then there's another great story that I love to tell where I was getting personal emails from a CEO for a year and I didn't know it. And this person was seeing me and probably had me on a list of prospects. I had no idea. And then one day I did a Google search looking for the kind of solution that this company provided. And I accidentally typed the Google search into my Gmail search bar instead of the Google search bar. And this string of emails that I had been receiving came up from this CEO. And I literally just sent that CEO a response and said, I somehow have been ignoring your emails and now I need you. Would you be willing to jump on a call? And so I ended up with a sales call with a CEO that hadn't done a sales call in 2 years because they have a sales team now and they'd scaled beyond that point. So she basically did a product demo, went through this whole process with me. And then I ended up becoming really an evangelist for that company as well, not just because of the product, which was awesome, but because that CEO took that approach with me and didn't pass me on to sales. And she said, look, this is probably the worst demo we've given in 18 months, but I really wanted to take the chance to connect with you. And I still find quite a bit of connection with that company and what they're doing, largely because it went from that scenario of, I need something to, hey, wait, these people have been trying to engage with me for a while, to getting a personal touch. And then I became an evangelist for their product and their service to other people who were doing similar things that I was in the marketplace. And so I think when we start talking about, the way a customer experiences your company, it's not just let's not lose their revenue, but let's turn people into basically a go-to-market soldier, for us, where they're bringing more people in. And in some industries, and Mikhail, in your situation, that may not happen because the big boys may not talk or may not like each other, the distributors. I don't know how that works in that case, but in most cases, business is just people. And so if you win somebody over and provide an extremely good value and experience for somebody, you're doing more than just bringing in whatever their top line is over a period of time. If nothing else, you're making their day a little better. And I feel like personally, that's worth getting up in the morning, even if it doesn't show up on a report somewhere. And that makes me excited about, what I do when I'm bringing value and providing that kind of experience, and when my company is working together to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people buy the relationship. That's where, as I said, there's so many options everywhere where, unfortunately, the bar is so low, it doesn't take much to even win that. I mean, I received a handwritten note from a B2C company that I recently bought from. I'm going to buy from them for the rest of my life now because they took 30 seconds out of their day just to write that. Who does that anymore? No one, but it sets them apart. They are lodged in my mind forever for when I need this, I'm going to go to them. You can do that in any industry, any product, any service, like that human relationship. That's all you need to do from that standpoint. So such an easy thing to do, incredibly undervalued, but really does go a long way. And then to feed on your part earlier about evangelists, people want to use something that works well and then be validated and share that with, I found this, you all should use it too and get this great result. So people are striving for that. If you can provide that experience and that results, you're going to get that every time. You just have to help them get to that point. And then, you're going to see all of your metrics, the cost metrics go down because you're going to be acquiring more customers off of less spend, but it's that snowball because you invested in them early. As that base grows, they're going to be helping you through that word of mouth, sharing all that information, and they're going to come to you just because, Jim down the street had a great experience, or they hear about it just from somewhere, and they know that you can help.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And, sometimes companies will create very important customer programs where they try to separate their best customers and praise them and build them up and pump them up. And sometimes that's really very valuable and it works. But sometimes you have these programs where some of the people who are kind of in that program are actually kind of disgruntled because they're not actually receiving the follow through that they used to when they were a newer customer or when the relationship was newer. And so I think, the tendency in business is to I think we should codify things that are of value for sure, turn them into, something that we do on a regular basis. But if we programatize everything and turn it into something that is just measured by a simple metric without the depth attached to it and the personal, approach attached to it, oftentimes we lose the value that we gained from the whole thing to begin with.
Yeah.
And, once you lose that personal touch, it's very difficult to recover it as a company. It seems to be a runaway one-way train kind of a thing. You go down that path until you hit a wall, and then you go, hey, wait a minute, now we have to rebuild this whole thing. What happened? And oftentimes there are a lot of metrics you could have been measuring that are a little deeper and even more closer to the relational aspect of things. And obviously the team that you hire and the culture that you build and everything that surrounds, the product and the company and the brand adds up to a whole. And that's really the ultimate end game, is to provide a customer experience that comes out of the deeper why of the company that's lived out in every corner of the company. And it's rare to find, but I think we'd all love to work in those environments and to create them as well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. Good stuff. I will just give a brief shout out. Lindsay, we're really glad you joined us. She's one of the best CS people on the planet. So you guys follow Lindsay Rogers on LinkedIn. You can learn a lot from how to do CS correctly. And really glad you're able to join us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel terrible. I'm like a fly on the wall over here, but I've been actively listening. So I really appreciate, being a part of this and being able to learn from all of you. Great questions, great topics. So thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Well, guys,
Rob, just one more thing I just wanted to add real quick, based on what you said last, and applicable to my situation. So I use a lot what I call indicative metrics, where you can't actually measure a lot, but you can measure trends. And so that's what we use a lot. So, we get kind of a sample of what is going on. And that's how we combine this with, this craft of marketing. If we see like on a sample of things that it's working, so it's indicative, it should be indicative of overall stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that many of the strongest marketers I see have the ability to see correlations where there's no direct ties. So you can see, in this month, our pipeline doubled. Well, you didn't spend more. What else did we do? Where you could say, we just sent out a different message. We started talking to people on Quora. We started doing this. Those correlations, the ability to connect those and things that are not, direct attribution style, don't undervalue that for what you're doing. You're finding a lot there that's really good. And you probably are making a lot of good decisions based off of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of lucky because I just have no choice but not to use attribution.
Well, go to a SaaS company and you're going to be like, this is so easy. What have you all been doing? You're going to blow everyone away. So
yeah, but even if you do have decent attribution, the degree to which attribution is, ironclad, foolproof, and completely trustworthy is going away every day, more and more. And I think also you're always going to be better off combining, a good bit of intuition and kind of understanding, parallel things that don't directly attribute alongside of what you can use attribution for, even if you've got really good attribution based on, your product market fit and your industry and all that good stuff. So, I mean, that was definitely my experience in the past where, I was seeing increasingly, impressive numbers in areas that made no sense to me and there was no attribution. So I had to ask the question of why are these numbers improving? What is actually the root cause of that? And not just be excited and trot out those numbers and go, look at me, but instead to say, what's the meaning that we can derive from this to provide a more sustainable long-term strategy based off of what actually is working. But you have to start with that, looking underneath the hood and trying to investigate, and often use more intuition than attribution. So, hey, well, guys, this has been a great conversation. Sam, thanks so much for joining us, and really appreciate the conversation today, guys. And this will be posted hopefully by Monday on our YouTube channel, and we'll keep the conversation going from there. I hope everybody has a good rest of your week.
You too. Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you. Bye.